As we mentioned, psilocybin can be found everywhere. There's no incentive to take psilocybin through the FDA process. Even Christianity, using wine, there's evidence that that wine was spiked with ergot, which is the same kind of underpinnings of what LSD is made out of.
So RFK is now the head of Health and Human Services. He has been in support of psychedelics.
That both excites me and scares me.
Been a part leadership team of maybe 7 different organizations. How do you know when to let go of one?
For me, it's about, am I still having fun? Psychedelics bring us such immense feelings of love and interconnectedness. The idea with microdosing is you take a little bit, and from anecdotal evidence, what a lot of people have said is that it can really help with anxiety or depression, or even help people feel more productive or creative.
So there's like a nutrition panel on the back of food and drinks and things like that, and they tell you what percentage of the daily value for like everything except for sugar. My conspiracy is it's been suppressed by big sugar. They don't tell you, how much is 25 grams 10% of your daily value or 100%? Right.
Yeah.
Guess what 100% of your daily value is?
What?
How many grams?
Okay.
Give me that Niko guess. This is the first question. We are live.
Is it 50?
25.
Really?
Yeah. Anything over that, you're causing harm to yourself.
This has 29. That's amazing. I think a Coke has like 40 something.
Wild.
Yeah. So in a balanced diet, you should have 25 grams.
Mm-hmm. And there's different kinds of sugar too, like high fructose corn syrup, and then natural sugar that you're getting from fruits and vegetables. Mm-hmm. But you seem really healthy.
Well, yeah, I beat myself up about it, but yeah,
you do?
I try to. Yeah. Well, so I have a newborn and this new business, and so it's a chapter where I find myself like not cooking as much anymore. So that means eating out and takeout and not exercising as much as I am used to. So I have been trying to, my mantra lately is, it is okay in this chapter. I'm doing really big things like having a baby and raising a baby and starting a new company. And so just trying to be okay with it slipping a little right now. Mm-hmm. But certainly things like this would be really helpful.
Now we're talking.
An easy way to get all the greens I need.
we will get into that, and there'll be a segment, a lightning round, sponsored by B Micro, where I will also gift you one of those. So you'll get a nice one. Cool. We do have a powder and a whole leaf version. The powder's the same thing, just powdered. It's sold out right now, but I like the whole leaf version better.
What do you just tell me, how do you drink it? What's the difference?
So one is the powder is really just most popular for really picky eaters, like parents buying it to sneak into their kids mac and cheese, pizza, like whatever. And some kids, like if they even see a leaf, it's just like no deal. It doesn't matter that they can't taste it. It's just so it's like you got to be extra sneaky with it, and that's the powder.
But can you mix it in with water and just drink it like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that is a good additional benefit. But most people are putting on their eggs or smoothies. Some people are putting it into the salads and their soup. You just don't cook it. So once you've plated whatever it is that you're making, that's when you put it on, because the heat can burn off some of the good stuff.
And then with the whole leaf, you use it the same way, but then you just it's more decoration that way.
It's less processed as well, and it has a little bit longer shelf life, and there's a little bit more nutrients, and it's a little less expensive.
Wow.
But some people are like, I need a powdered because my kids don't want to see it.
Yeah. Why does it get extra shelf life?
Because it's less processed, less surface area, more surface area. Like powder is like 10 times the surface area, leads for more oxidation, and then it just deteriorates faster. It doesn't go bad, it's just the nutrients decrease faster.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. What are some of your health hacks right now? So where are you holding the line? I hear you having to kind of give up in a couple areas here and there. I mean, you rode your bike here today. You're riding your bike like crazy.
Yeah. And
even though it's an e-bike.
Even though I didn't break a sweat doing it. I also have a large need for social activities. And so what I've been trying to do is couple riding my bike with friends. And so while before I used to like race bikes and train a lot and just spend a lot of time riding by myself, looking at my computer on the bike, now I only ride bikes with friends for fun. And so I try to just get out on bike rides or runs even with friends, so I can couple those exercise and social time. And then I also got a running stroller for the baby, so I've been doing a little bit of that, even though I don't like running on roads. But it's nice because she'll nap and I'll just like push her and run a couple miles. So that's where I've been trying to like basically combine my needs to be the most efficient. Because if I'm only going to get an hour a day or a half hour a day to be active, I can kind of combine some things together.
Are you doing mountain biking, road biking, like trails around town?
Yeah, gravel and mountain. So I try to get off road as fast as I can because we don't like the cars.
And where are you going? What's your spot around Boulder?
I go up the canyon a lot, like up Boulder Canyon, and I'll on the gravel bike I'll go up Chapman, which is a beautiful road that goes to the top of Flagstaff, and there's no cars on it, just gravel there. And then on the mountain bike, I'll go up Batasso on the other side of the canyon and do a lap there. So yeah, Boulder Canyon is my typical like route up because it's just so beautiful too. And then I jump in the creek afterwards, and it's like perfect.
Beautiful. Now, last time we spoke, you had a whole stable of bikes. You still have a lot of bikes?
Yeah, too many. I'm down to riding like 2 of them, but I have 7, and yeah, it's. So there's a few bikes I haven't ridden in a couple seasons, and I'm like, I need to not hold on to these bikes anymore.
This podcast is brought to you by B Micro, organic freeze-dried microgreens for easy, natural nutrition. Sprinkle them on any meal and enjoy the benefits. Shop now at bmicro.farm and use code STEVE15 to save. Yeah, I've got a mountain bike and a road bike. My road bike was gifted to me from a thief that stole my mountain bike. He left it in the bushes, trying to trade up, trying to get them both.
Yeah.
But he stole my mountain bike off of, not far from here, where I used to have a commercial kitchen right around the corner from here. Just had like a car battery in his backpack and some kind of like power like cutter.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like Jaws of Lifestyle, and cut it off the back of my truck and then rode away with it. I watched him do it. The police came and they were just like, there's nothing we can do.
Wow.
He's gone.
A U-lock, or how did like?
It was locked to like the
rack.
The rack had its own lock on it, and then there was a kryptonite like U-lock on it as well. Yeah, he cut it all, and I was like, I could see him right outside the window. He was like 5 feet away from me. I like ran to the door. I'm like gonna run after him. I'm like, this guy could just stab me.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing? I just gotta let it go. And then the police are like, it's gone. So now I've got air tags on all my bikes, and but he left his bike in the bushes, and I was driving away. I'm like, okay, it's dark now. He's gone. The lights from my car lit up the reflectors on a bike, and now I ride that. And I never had a road bike before. I've only had mountain bikes. So yeah, I'm in the 2-bike gang.
Yeah. Well, in road, I used to like growing up. I mountain biked a bunch, and I would make fun of road bikes. And then the first time I got on one, I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, these are
things
fun.
Fast.
This is like a Ferrari. I've been riding a Jeep. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I'm all about those too.
Where'd you grow up riding?
Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up BMX racing, like on little BMX bikes. And then I brought the BMX bike to the trails once by my house, and it was amazing. And then I was like, oh, this is what mountain biking is. Then I got a mountain bike, and yeah, raced mountain bike all through college. And I started road racing in college too. But yeah, loved it.
Okay, so you grew up in Arizona and you went to Arizona State. Mm-hmm. What was life in Arizona like? What was your kind of early days like? I
grew up in a Mormon community, which was great. I have a lot of appreciation for their culture, the way that they help each other and support each other.
They really like keep it in the family.
Yeah.
Like they're like, we're doing only business like in like the Mormon community.
Well, and because it was a majority Mormon, I think my school was like 85% Mormon, something like that. I didn't feel separate from the Mormon community, even though I'm not Mormon. I didn't go to temple with them and stuff. But because it was so like majority Mormon, I felt a lot of belonging with it, which was really nice. But they value good grades and education and sports. And so like the coolest kids in our school were also the smartest kids in our school. And so I think it put a lot of those values into me of like education is important and stuff like that. But it was the suburbs of Phoenix, like way out in Gilbert, Arizona. And it seemed like that kind of small town suburb vibe for kids, which was, it seemed like the point of us growing up and getting educated was to figure out how to get to college and leave, like be able to escape. So me and all my friends, our hearts were set on trying to get out of Arizona. And then I got stuck there because my girlfriend went to ASU, and so I followed her. And that's how I went to Arizona State. But then I eventually escaped for grad school, went to Boston for to study economics, and I was able to get out. But it seemed like a place where the whole point of growing up there was to leave.
What were you like as a kid? What did you enjoy doing? You shared some BMX and good grades.
Yeah, fairly good grades. I was in a lot of different circles. Like I was like hanging out with the drama kids and student council and the athlete kids, and so I was kind of, was able to move between different circles pretty easily and fluidly, and I liked that. I liked the variability of it. I was involved in so many clubs. I was out on campus like from way before school started until way after school started, just with all the clubs and extracurriculars. Yeah, I had a great time in school. It was fun.
What was your first entrepreneurial act? Were you doing things? Were you mowing lawns as a kid?
No, I was in a punk rock band. And I would say that in a lot of ways, that was entrepreneurial for me, of like, how do we create something that I think would be appreciated by the people we were trying to serve, which was our classmates. And how do we get shows? I think that the same sort of leadership that I feel and creativity that I feel in a startup, it felt that way in the bands. And this is actually the first time I'm tying, being in bands together with a startup, but we created a brand around the band and swag and like a lot of the same things you do with a startup. So that was really fun. My dad was a comically bad entrepreneur. When I was 15, he got laid off from his job at the bank, which he was at for a decade or something like that. And he never really got another stable job after that. He's tried to start things. And so when I was young, I remember like in high school, I used to have to answer the phone, Skievaski Fine Jewelry, because he started like a jewelry business, and he would sell stuff on eBay. I was always just like confused as to why he was doing things the way that he was. And I realized much later on, like so much of my entrepreneurial journey was trying to, after I realized I wanted to be an entrepreneur, trying to not be like my dad in that process, like trying to, seeing how he did it and being like, there's got to be a better way. And so I became a student of the lean startup methodology because I saw a lot of waste in what he was doing. For instance, he wanted to start a sausage business. And so the first thing he did was he bought a big saran wrap machine that they use like to roll like your industrial, meat stuff before he even like learned how to make sausage or figured out if anyone wanted sausage. And so it was like stuff like that where I was always like, why are you buying that now? And not like figuring out if people want your product. So yeah, that was a big part of my entrepreneurial journey, was just kind of seeing how he never really made it and how he had a lot of dreams and for whatever reason wasn't able to make those dreams turn into anything that could support him. And so I don't know. This kind of ties into my psychedelic journey too, if we want to go there.
Sure.
But I was starting my first company, and telling myself I don't want to be like my dad, and using the lean startup, and we were doing this company in healthcare technology, and it was going really well. And there was so much of my ego on the line around like, how can I prove to myself and others that that I can do it, that I'm the real deal. And it was around this time too, when we started the company, that I had my first psychedelic journeys, and so much of the message that I was receiving from those experiences were helping me understand the impact that my behaviors had on the world. That in starting a company, I can impact, not only our employees, but the customers and our customers' customers. And in healthcare, we're talking about human lives. And so a lot of the psychedelic epiphany that I brought back to the company was around making sure that we focused on that impact. And that I think really drove a culture in our company that made us ultimately more successful than I think we would have been otherwise. And so, long story short, this company I was the president and founder of it for 10 years. We raised $100 million in venture capital and private equity, had 300 employees over that time period, probably more. Yeah, we made a pretty big impact in the healthcare technology space. It's infrastructure tech, company called Redox. And 10 years into it, I was realizing that I wasn't learning as much as I was at the beginning, and I wasn't feeling like I was contributing as much. And I took a sabbatical, went on retreat, did some psilocybin and MDMA and in a therapeutic setting. And the download I got was that the company didn't need me anymore. And it was sort of a very pointed ego death around, like, if I am not Niko, founder of Redox, like, who am I? And this is the company's logo tattooed on my arm here, because I lost a bet with our sales team. But it's like I wear the company on my sleeve, right? It's who I am. And so I had that experience of like, well, they don't need me, but do I actually need them to support my identity? And as I was going through this, a month into my sabbatical or so, I found out my dad had cancer. And my relationship with him over the time that I was growing this company had certainly faded, diminished. And there was nothing, wrong with our relationship, but it was just, we just grew apart. And he moved to the Philippines with my mom, where she's from. And so I hadn't seen him in a couple years. And I just knew that it was a stop on my healing journey that I had to get to at some point. And so I was talking with him about his diagnosis, and he wasn't sure what he was going to do. I was feeling some anxiety building up around it. Certainly, when you get a diagnosis like that, there's a lot of unknowns. He was also going down the rabbit hole of things he could find on the internet, all sorts of stuff that are miracle cures to cancer. He started drinking olive oil from the bottle and stuff like that. I kind of leaned into that a little bit, and I was like, people are using psilocybin after cancer diagnosis to help them reconcile their lives and what they're going to do about it. And they're also using psilocybin to help with smoking cessation and alcohol use disorder, which were, certainly the contributors to his cancer. And he agreed to do a journey. So I flew to the Philippines with 10 grams of mushrooms, ground up in pills. And before leaving, I had worked with some facilitators in Boulder to try to help figure out how I could actually sit with him in a way that he could get what he wanted out of it, and to really make sure that I didn't bring my own agenda to the journey, because I certainly knew what I would have wanted him to get out of it. And kind of, my whole relationship with him was seemingly trying to change him. But yeah, flew to the Philippines. I sat with him in a journey, and he didn't talk the whole time. I was sitting there with my notebook ready to document everything. He didn't say anything, and I kind of just logged time, and he had a smoke break right in the middle of it. And I'm like, how are you standing right now? You just took 5 grams of mushrooms.
Did you take some too?
No. I was by the book, trying to do it the therapeutic way. We had East Forest playing. It was very, as you would in a clinical trials setting. And after a few hours, he got up and took this eye mask off and was like, you hungry? Should we get lunch? And I'm like, I guess we're done. So we went and got lunch, and I was trying to, I was instructed by the facilitators to not try to process it right away, give him a day to talk about it. But what I noticed immediately was that he was at ease. He was chilling. He happily had a beer and a cigarette at lunch and didn't have the kind of anxiety or self-consciousness about it that he had before, knowing that may have contributed. And essentially, he just never talked about getting better again. He was just at peace with where he was. And instead of what I thought we would do is I would get him on a plane and we'd fly back to the US and do chemo and surgery and all that stuff and try to help him fight it. Instead, we went to the beach and we hung out and we listened to Pink Floyd. I smoked a cigarette with him, bought him beer, hung out. We used the mushrooms for fun instead of for therapeutic purposes. And then I said goodbye to him and flew back home. And a week later, he died.
Wow.
Yeah. And what I experienced in that couple of weeks I got to spend with him was probably for one of the first times in my life, actually just seeing him as a guy, as a guy living in the Philippines, trying to get by in the world, having fun. And I saw all the parts of me that are like him and all the parts of me that appreciate that I got from him. Yeah, and not trying to run away from that anymore. So I got so much healing out of the experience, and seeing him able to die in that way, in hindsight, is perfectly aligned with who he was. If he somehow, after this trip was like, we're going to fight it and I'm going to quit drinking and smoking and we're going to do everything we can, it would have been a different person. Like, that's not who that wouldn't be aligned with him. Yeah. So, I came back, I used these natural medicines to help with my grieving process. Was able to work with my mom as well. And she saw some of what happened with my dad. And so she was open to trying as well. And at this point I hadn't worked at my company in like 6 months. And I called my co-founder and was like, I don't think I work here anymore. And he's like, no, I don't think you do either. And so, yeah, I left and didn't know what I was going to do, but I turned to the medicine and just got more interested in, like, I knew what it had done for me over my life, but seeing what it did for my dad at the end of his, seeing what it was doing for my mom, realizing that the impact that it could have could be for so many different use cases than I had thought possible. And for so many more than all of the research is talking about with serious mental illness and the dramatic impact it's having there. So I was just motivated to pull on that thread and follow that path, and kind of led to this direction that I'm in now.
Help me understand who the soul of psilocybin is. Like, what is the spirit? If you were to personify it, how is it able to bring your dad at ease and support your grief and bring clarity and trust and courage? And how can it do all these things?
Yeah, I love the way you asked that question too. Who is the soul? I haven't really thought about it that way. I can certainly feel that while I'm using these medicines, but the way that I have intellectualized the power of psilocybin or just broadly more psychedelics is that it knocks you out of thought patterns, and these could be negative thought patterns, they could be positive thought patterns, but it helps me back away from those thought patterns and kind of see with new perspective. When I think about anxiety, I get anxiety sometimes, and it's often because I'm like antsy about like going fast enough or like doing all the things I want to do. And so these are looping thought patterns about the future where I'm like, oh, what am I going to do right now, today? Like, how am I going to maximize my time appropriately? Kind of what we started the conversation talking about. How can I combine all the things I want to do into one? So that is a looping thought pattern about the future. Depression is often talked about as a looping thought pattern about the past, of things you might regret or things you might miss. Certainly grieving, right, is kind of a backwards facing thought pattern and looping. And so I think where a lot of these medicines can be really powerful is breaking those patterns. And the analogy that Michael Pollan, who wrote about a lot of this, popularized is the snow globe, where on a mountain there's these paths carved, trees cleared and paths carved that we can sled down or ski down, and those become the well-worn paths, and that's like our neural pathways and the patterns of thinking that we all hold. And when you take psychedelics, it's like shaking up the snow globe, and anything's possible because the snow's going to land somewhere, and we can kind of recreate those patterns.
Fresh snow, you can jump from one path to another path, create a completely new path, whereas before you were kind of stuck, forced to go down these deeply rooted paths. Yeah,
well, and I think that is why when using psychedelics, the preparation and integration aspects of it, we often talk about psychedelics in a 3-stage model where you prepare for the journey, which is really setting intentions, which I kind of think about as like the frame in which you look at the experience through. That's really important, because if you go in without intentions, you might be standing at the top of this new mountain to keep working on this metaphor, but you don't even know which direction you want to go down. So what paths are you going to carve? You kind of have to have some directionality to it. And it's not a expectation, it's more of a direction that you want to go.
some preparation. I find that these plants want us to prepare, and they want us to make sacrifice as well. And some of that sacrifice can be in the form of diet.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of these plants specifically will with ayahuasca in particular, with the actual pharmacology of the medicines in there. You have to be on a very specific diet going into it, which prepares your body for what it's about to go through. But yeah, the preparation of it, I think, is a physical and mental preparation for this undoubtedly traumatic experience you're going to go through. And when I say traumatic, I mean, like, that's what shaking the snow globe is. It can be wildly positive, or it can be really challenging and scary, but it is traumatic. And then as the snow falls down and you come back into who you are, which I always have to remind myself will happen, because that's my biggest fear under these medicines, is like, I forget who I am, or I lose touch of the things I care about.
That's a very common fear, which I'm not sure really ever happens to anyone.
Yeah, you always come back. And we can get into some of the data that we've been aggregating on this space too, and we've seen thousands of journeys in our system now, and everyone always comes back.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah,
that's good. Everyone comes back.
Spoiler alert: you're coming back.
So, but it's scary when you think you might not. But as you come back, the real work begins, the integration work, which is now you have your fresh powder on the mountain, and what are the new pathways that you want to carve? You could certainly go back down the same ski run. Like, those trees are still cleared. Like, you can keep going down that path, but you have the opportunity now to carve a new path. And I think that is what is so powerful. The thing that kept bringing me back to psilocybin throughout my entrepreneurial journey was a feeling of overwhelm. When I started feeling I was like, there was too much going on and I was being crushed by my to-do list, it was a signal to me that I needed to go sit with the medicine. And after the journey, I would look at the same to-do list and I would get excited by it. And I'd be like, look at all the amazing things I get to do. These projects that seemed overwhelmingly huge and crushing now seem like, what is my job? I get to like do these things. I made this.
Just full of gratitude, appreciation, love.
Absolutely. And that would stick with me for 6-12 months. Like, I would go into my work with that appreciation, with that excitement. And that's like the new path I was carving. And so I think we might be getting away from that mountain metaphor, but it changed the perspective. Yeah.
Would you share, what does sitting with these medicines look like for you? You shared how you sat with your dad.
Yeah.
What about your first time sitting? What was the setting? What might it look like? How has that maybe evolved or shifted to today?
Yeah, I approached, my first psychedelic experience was psilocybin, and I did not think it was going to be a therapeutic experience. I thought it'd be a recreational experience. I was with my girlfriend in the North Woods of Wisconsin at her grandparents' cabin, and it was winter, so frozen lake, and it was just beautiful. And we took mushrooms, and it was like absolutely a wonderful, happy, mystical experience. We walked on the lake and we spent time in nature, and and it wasn't until after that where I looked back at that experience and was like, it was profound. And it was profound and it was fun and there was so much love, but it's not just that. It's so much more. And I have to take these things more seriously. And I felt the benefit of them immediately afterwards. And that, like, my relationship with her was amazing after that. I had already started Redox at that time, and I just came back to work with so much excitement and appreciation and joy that I started using them more intentionally. And I certainly had these experiences with friends, but most often I would use them alone. I would take mushrooms and walk into the woods, and I'd typically go to a trail where I knew there weren't a lot of people at, and have places where I could go off trail a little bit, but not get lost, because it's easy to get lost on mushrooms. But you always come back. Yeah, and so that my practice.
Maybe to that, always tell somebody that you're going out and doing this, and just keep it in a really safe way.
For sure. Yeah, my wife always knew, and sometimes I would call her and be like, I need companionship. I need a friend. So it turned into more of a solo thing. And then
About how much were you taking?
I would take, it varied, but between 2 to 5 grams. So on the 2 side was much more of a lighter, euphoric kind of a good, like I could still walk around. And then on the 4 to 5 gram range, like, I was not walking around.
And they vary widely on what type of, how would you say, strain? Some are much stronger, some are much gentler and softer. There's quite a range.
Yeah, and I've been learning a lot more about this as we've been working with cultivators in the regulated psilocybin space now, in that the cultivators actually think of it as generational with selective breeding. So they'll grow a batch of mushrooms, which might be a certain strain of a psilocybin cubensis mushroom, like a golden teacher is a popular strain that's used in the space. And then they'll actually they'll get them tested and find the ones that have the highest potency of psilocybin in them, and then they'll breed those ones. They'll take those spores and breed the next generation. And so some of these cultivators are on their double digits generations of selective breeding in this way. And similar to what's happened in cannabis, we're seeing, it used to be that it was like a 10 to 1 psilocybin to, like, if you had a gram of mushrooms, you could say it's probably 10 milligrams of psilocybin. It's no longer that anymore. Some of these mushrooms that they're growing are so highly potent that you could take a gram or 2 grams and it would have 40 milligrams of psilocybin.
What are your thoughts on growing it in such a potent way?
I think it is. So before this regulated space, you would weigh the mushroom, and that's how you would figure out how much to take. And when we're growing it in a really potent way, we're changing that, and so that is no longer dependable. If you're using mushrooms that your friend grew under his bed, it's probably still applicable. But these professional growers are really getting, they're maximizing the active ingredient. Yeah, and I'm not sure
what's the benefit of that.
So they get more yield for their crop, and they're used. So in the regulated space, they get it tested, and a label gets slapped on their batch saying what the psilocybin content is and any other active ingredients in it. And so they're able to just get more out of it. And so when you go into using psilocybin in a healing center or service center, which is what the states call these clinics that serve these medicines, you don't take it by the gram, you take it by the actual psilocybin content. So when our team went to Portland, this was the first time I did a psilocybin journey in the regulated space. I took 25 milligrams of psilocybin, and it was served to me in tea. And so I have no idea what the mushroom looked like, but they knew based on the packaging and the way that the product was prepared exactly how much was in it.
So 25 milligrams, how would that equate to like the old way? That's like 2.5 grams.
Something like that. Yeah. And we did a group setting, and I would say, just to wrap up your question about how my experiences with these medicines have evolved, I had started using them, kind of solo by myself, and then I started going to retreats, using them with a facilitator in a group setting, and essentially once I started doing it in that more controlled setting, more intentional, and certainly solo was intentional, but with a facilitator, I found that they could really help keep me on track with my intentions and not let me drift and not let me be consumed by outside stimulus as much, and remind me why I was there. I would get 10x the benefit of doing it on my own. On my own, I would typically download like one epiphany from the experience, one new way of thinking about the world. And when I did it with a facilitator, I might get 10 of these, because I would have them, and beyond just experiencing the epiphany, I would also be able to share them with the facilitator in real time. And then in integration, they would remind me, and I would still feel it the same way. And for those people out there who haven't had a psychedelic journey, these epiphanies are kind of hard to grasp. It's described as ineffable because it's hard to actually say. But one of the quotes that came out of some of the clinical trials in this space around smoking cessation, I think captured this really well. In that someone was asked, "Hey, you use psilocybin and you quit smoking. You've been smoking your whole life. You've wanted to quit smoking for so long. Like, what changed?" And they said, "Well, I realized that smoking was damaging my lungs, and these are the only lungs I have." And it's like, yeah, we all knew that. That's why we don't smoke. But that's the type of epiphany I'm talking about here, in that is something that we can all logically understand, but to feel that in your bones such that you can overcome an addiction as strong as nicotine and tobacco, it is like, that's the type of movement that one of these epiphanies can have. And so, when I do it in a therapeutic setting, it can kind of maximize those epiphanies because I might be able to capture more of them because I have a partner there who's reflecting them back to me, who's helping me focus on like maybe moving through one and seeing what's behind that.
So this is in a one-on-one therapeutic setting?
One-on-one is certainly, I think, the best way to maximize it, but I've only done one-on-one a couple times. Most of the time it's been in groups.
Okay, and that's okay. Typically in group settings, it's recommended to not speak because you can disrupt other people's experience. So how are you then sharing that with the facilitator? Yeah,
well, so I think that I've been in groups like you just described. I've also been in groups that, it's a cuddle puddle the whole time, and people are whispering wisdom to each other where you're actually feeding off of each other's experiences as well. And I've been in groups where the facilitator is like basically making rounds like a physician would in a hospital to each of the participants and checking in. And so it's at those kind of check-ins that these things would happen. But the role of the facilitator, as I see it in these experiences, is to help you make sense of what's going on, not in the moment, but afterwards. But be able to stay in the moment while you're actually under the influence of these medicines. And so what I mean by that is I often struggle with letting go and being able to, like, I fight the ego death. I want to hold on to remembering who I am and what I care about, and I get nostalgic and stuff, and that's keeping me outside of the experience because I'm thinking about other things, not what's right in front of me. And so the facilitators are often reminding me of just like closing my eyes, going through it, not distracting myself by looking at nature or beautiful things, but like really just sitting with it and knowing that on the other side of whatever that distress is something worth trying to find.
Yeah, so recommended with eyes closed, maybe even an eye mask, because the goal is to go as deep as you can inwardly.
Yeah, and I think that's a big distinction of using psychedelics in a therapeutic setting, in that in a recreational setting, it's often being used to enhance outside stimulus. You might be at a concert or in nature, and you're like experiencing the awe and the beauty of that. But in a therapeutic setting, you want to work on whatever you're working on. And so the goal is to go inside. And so using tools like eye mask, oftentimes headphones or music to help turn you inward, that's the therapeutic model that's been developed within the clinical setting.
What is your sense on where this information is coming from? You get these downloads, you get these hits, these knowings. Where's that coming from?
I think it's coming from within. Or I guess to get a little more heady or out of our heady, it just feels like there's a shared knowing, a shared consciousness, a like universal truth that you can tap into. And when I say it's coming from within, I believe that it's always there. And these medicines are a way to shortcut our way to that. I've had a meditation practice since before I used psychedelics, but it wasn't until I used psychedelics that I understood, or that I felt like I understood what meditation was for. Because the first time I meditated after a psychedelic experience, I realized that I could touch a little bit of what I felt with psychedelics, the full presence and the quietness and something special beyond that. And so it certainly enhanced my meditation practice. But I think that the monks of the world who have reached an enlightened state, I think they're probably living in that state that I can only touch with psychedelics, or there are spiritual teachers in the world who have gotten there. I feel like most religions, at the people who sit in prayer or in meditation or these other spiritual practices are going after that same thing. And that's that kind of unifying truth or unifying consciousness, or something that's out there that we can only touch with psychedelics. That I can only touch with psychedelics, that certainly other people can touch in other means. And as a caveat, I was at a retreat. It was not a psychedelic retreat, but I actually had an experience that, to me, I can only interpret it as a psychedelic experience. But it was, I don't know if it was like, it was almost like this nervous breakdown, but it became a very spiritual, it was the most spiritual experience I've ever had. And the only way that I could deal with it in the moment was because of my experience with psychedelics. I related it to that, and I thought, this feels like I'm on a psychedelic and I'm going to roll with it. And in thinking about it afterwards, it was a mystical experience that I don't know what caused it. There was, interpersonal things that probably contributed to it, but yeah, I felt like I talked to God, and I wasn't under the influence of any medicine. But psychedelics gave me the tools to deal with that in a way that didn't destabilize me.
Do you think that these psychedelics help us to talk to God, that God is inside of us? We're all a sliver, a piece of God? Yeah.
I think that what humanity has called God for forever, and there's all sorts of different types of gods that humanity has described. I think it's the same thing that we talk to with psychedelics, that we tap into. And there's this really fascinating line of thought around tying the origins of most religions to psychedelics as sacrament. And even Christianity, using wine as sacrament in the early days of Christianity, there's evidence that wine was spiked with ergot, which is the same kind of underpinnings of what LSD is made out of. So it was likely that wine could have produced psychedelic-like experiences. I mentioned I grew up amongst the Mormons, and so I had always had a fascination with their history because it's such a young religion. And there's a lot of evidence that Joseph Smith, he always had a medicine person by his side. He was able to create mystical experiences within his congregation using sacraments that were created by his medicine person. And even the origin stories of Mormonism, Joseph Smith climbs this hill. He's in a pretty challenging emotional state, and he finds these golden tablets, and he reads the wisdom from them, and then they disappear. He talks to an angel. He comes down the mountain, and for 3 days he dictates the Book of Mormon to his friend, and while his wife is there. And I've opened the Book of Mormon and started reading it, and just imagining what someone who's coming down from a psychedelic experience might say, and I'm like, it's all here. It's beautiful, and it's wise in a lot of ways. But yeah, there's a lot of these really fun historical accounts of psychedelics and religion mixing.
Yeah, share some of those with us, or even farther back. There's the stoned ape theory.
Yeah, that
we have been consuming these mushrooms for millions of years, and that has helped us to develop our brain at a really rapid pace.
Yeah, I love that theory. When I think about what makes humans different from other animals and mammals, it's my perception is that we have this inner monologue, this consciousness that we can talk to, and it allows us to think, and that thinking helps us develop the intelligence that we have to make stuff and society. And the stoned ape theory is really around how we evolved from monkeys who presumably don't have that level of consciousness. But what happens if you give a monkey psychedelics? Might they be able to, especially if over time those animals are able to evolve and kind of selectively breed and reproduce, are psychedelics actually a thing that makes us more have more fitness, and using the genetics terms. And if you have more fitness, then you're going to breed and reproduce and evolve into potentially something different. So that's the theory, in that psychedelics actually caused that. One of there's a lot of evidence that lots of animals use psychedelics. One of my favorite stories around this are elephants. Of course, elephants are these wonderfully wise animals that they have this wisdom that humans don't really understand, and they can find water where they shouldn't be able to, and they can walk hundreds of miles to do that, and that's shared between generations. And I was watching this beautiful documentary on elephants just because I'm into them, and they talked about how these elephants once a year make a pilgrimage to the beach because they have to eat this certain leaf that has salt water on it, because that's where they get salt in their diet. And they do it once a year, and they stock up, and they walk back into the jungle. And it turns out these are the leaves of the iboga plant that it creates ibogaine, which I think is on my t-shirt here. Yeah, that one.
Known as one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful psychedelic.
Yeah. And so these elephants, and the documentary this was on Netflix, this beautiful elephant documentary. It's not about psychedelics, but they just talk about this experience, this pilgrimage that the elephants make. They eat the iboga leaf, and then they do like ceremonies with their clan, because it's a lot of elephants from different places that come together. So it's, like the Burning Man of elephants coming to the beach once a year, and then they all go back to their respective areas. So of course the narrator is talking about, what if these psychedelics are actually contributing to the consciousness that elephants bring, that we know so little about, but what we do know is that they're incredibly wise animals.
What's some more history around psilocybin that you could share, maybe from the legal side of things? When you went to the Philippines, I think it was my understanding that the Philippines might be legal there, or decriminalize. It's the way that it is in the U.S. and many Western places where it's like Schedule 1. It's not the same way in many places of the world. There's many places of the world where many of these sacred plant medicines are legal. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, and I think I heard you wrong. So in the Philippines, it is illegal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought it was illegal. Okay.
No, it was a big risk bringing it there. And my mom actually was the one who smuggled it in, because she's a tiny old Filipino lady, and she was like, they're not going to care about me, but you're like an American guy.
Putting it in capsules, that's a very safe smart way to do it. Yeah.
So that was certainly a big risk. But yeah, the general history of psilocybin in the West is that, there's lots of evidence showing that humans have been taking psilocybin mushrooms for as long as we can date back. But Western culture had really lost that tradition, and it was rediscovered in the 50s by a banker who went down to Mexico and sat with some elders there. Maria Sabina was a carrier of this medicine, and a medicine woman who shared it with him.
And Mexico's an area where this tradition and lineage really comes from.
Yeah, and she was in a village in the mountains of Oaxaca, and where still villages to this day use these medicines in ceremony, and shared it with him. And he went back and he wrote an article in Time magazine and coined the term magic mushrooms in that article. And it started the article was about his hunt for these magic mushrooms, and he found them in Oaxaca. And sadly, in the 60s, in the psychedelic craze, as LSD was becoming popularized, Westerners, Americans, were making it down to Mexico, to these small villages, to try to sit with these medicine people, and actually did a lot of harm coming down there. And so within the psychedelic community, there's a lot of reverence given to paying respect for these people who have carried the lineage of the medicine. We wouldn't have found it unless they held on to it. And also, paying reciprocity for it. Our wealth is staggering in comparison to theirs in a lot of cases. And just not misappropriating its use. And so psilocybin in particular kind of has that lineage attached to it. But with the psychedelic movement of the 60s, and of course that created the anti-establishment movement that, my parents talked about, which, was a big part of our society in America, motivated the war on drugs and made these things illegal. The war on drugs made them illegal, and put them in Schedule I status, which is defined by the DEA as having no therapeutic benefit and high potential for abuse.
What is your conspiracy around, or beliefs around, why these were made Schedule I?
Well, the 50s were all about a lot of conformity, a lot of, white picket fence and, moving into the suburbs and kind of creating the American dream. And the 60s, I didn't live through any of this, right? But this is like what I assume in hearing about how this went down. In the 60s, Vietnam War, the psychedelic movement really propelled the backlash against the conformity and that society was heading into. And that created a lot of tension, right? Tension between the establishment, big companies, government, our parents, like the establishment, and what the younger people were doing. And Ronald Reagan said that Timothy Leary, who was one of the pioneers of the psychedelic movement and really popularized the use of LSD, was the most dangerous man in the country. And yeah, wanted to crush this uprising of new ways of thinking and being, because it was quite radical. People were talking about, like, let's spike the water supply. And LSD is such a potent chemical that you don't have to get a lot into people. We're talking like micrograms before they have full-blown psychedelic experiences. And so I don't believe we should spike the water supply. I think these things should be used with intentionality, not against people's wills. Mm-hmm. But there were talks like that in that time. And I don't blame them, right? There are countries at war and people are dying, and it was a crazy time to live in. And so I think it was more of a social backlash and a way for the government to use their power of law to try to quell that. There's a long history within the drug war that have a lot of other things intertwined with it, racism and things like that we could certainly talk about. But I think regarding psilocybin and LSD and these psychedelics, I think that's probably the most applicable thread to pull on there. But yeah, they were made illegal back then in the 60s and 70s. And when they were first discovered, when LSD was first discovered, it was actually created by a pharmaceutical company, and it was given out to psychologists for them to figure out what to do with it. They were like, hey, this does something incredible in our brains, but we don't know what it was. And before the term psychedelic was around, it was called a psychomimetic, which is to mimic a psychotic state. And so therapists and psychiatrists were thinking, we can use these medicines to actually figure out what's going on in someone's mind who has schizophrenia or psychosis. And if we can make a temporary psychotic state, we might be able to figure out how to get someone out of that. They realized that's not actually what's going on. It kind of looks like that from the surface, but yeah, it's not the same thing. And so they evolved, but they kind of escaped the lab, as we say. They escaped the research side of it and started being used by this counterculture. But the origins of psychedelics in America in the 50s and 60s were used in a therapeutic setting. Were trying to be used to figure out how to help people with mental illness. There's actually a province in Canada, Saskatchewan, that did a lot of research on using LSD for alcohol use disorder, and they made it a standard of care paid for by the provincial government, by their health system in Canada, as a standard care for someone who had alcohol use disorder. So there's this history of using it for therapy and for serious mental illness. And then drug wars make them illegal. The clinical research really dies off because clinical research is often funded by the NIH, the NIMH. So that all dries up, and no one touches psychedelics in a clinical setting for a long time. They go underground, which of course they've been used amply in the underground for, since then. But about 15, 20 years ago, a few pioneering researchers, Roland Griffiths, among others, he was at Johns Hopkins, picked it back up and had the courage to ask for IRB approval to get their study approved, and started doing research again. And a lot of the research has stayed away from LSD because of the stigma that the 60s brought around LSD, and is focused more on psilocybin because it's comes from the ground. Psilocybin mushrooms are actually very easy to grow and easy to find, and so you can forage for them. I found one growing next to a tree in my front yard. They're just like...
In Boulder?
Yeah, in Boulder. And it wasn't a species that you'd have to eat a lot of them, but it had psilocybin in it. And you probably get sick from other things.
Is it telltale way when you cut it open, it's blue? Or it turns blue after a minute?
I don't know.
That's what I'd heard. And that's why in Dune, everybody's eyes are blue.
Oh.
When that was like a nod to psilocybin.
I didn't know that. I know there's certainly psilocybin mushrooms that are blue, but not all of them for sure. But maybe when you cut them open.
Yeah, when you cut it open.
I'll ask a cultivator that.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in here and give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's podcast, B Micro, the easiest way to sneak vegetables into any meal. Due to soil depletion, GMOs, and monocropping, Americans are not getting enough nutrients. So in 2018, I founded B Micro, the first freeze-dried microgreens company in the US to help Americans get more concentrated natural nutrients into their diet. Microgreens are a phase in the plant's life when they're 14 days old and naturally the most concentrated in vitamins, minerals, nutrients, all the good things that we need. Our microgreens are grown here in the US in soil in a greenhouse. They're certified USDA organic and regenerative organic. We grow, wash, and freeze dry them to extend their 1 week shelf life to over 1 year, allowing us to ship anywhere in the US without the worry of spoilage. We have 2 flavors, broccoli, backed by over 2,000 studies on sulforaphane and its powerful detox benefits, and a blend of red cabbage, radish, and broccoli, the most potent detox formula we've tested, offering you the most bang for your buck. Easily sneak these microgreens in any meal. Eggs, smoothies, pizza, pasta, even your kids' mac and cheese. You can't even taste it. Use code STEVE15 to save at bmicro.farm.
Yeah, but the modern sort of resurgence of psychedelics were really driven off of these pioneering researchers at Johns Hopkins, NYU, Stanford, UCSF, University College London. These really prominent med schools were taking back up the research and finding incredible outcomes. They're finding outcomes with using psilocybin, like one session of psilocybin to treat treatment-resistant depression, and it's curing a lot of people. And I'm not sure what the numbers are from the clinical trials, but they're way more effective than SSRIs or SNRIs or other traditional antidepressants. And so the psychiatry industry hasn't seen medicines this effective ever. And so I had the opportunity, I guess it's 2 years ago now, to go to the American College of Neuropsychopharmacology conference. At the conference, I had to learn how to say that. Because,
I was like, nice job.
It's ACNP, but yeah, American College of Neuropsychopharmacology. I went with our med school here at University of Colorado, and half the sessions were talking about psychedelics. And so these are neuropsychopharmacology, right? This is people who are making drugs for our brains. And so all of the pharma companies were there, and all the academics from psychiatry departments and in the country were there, and all they were talking about were psychedelics. Not all they were talking about, but it's clearly the breakthrough thing. So that has spearheaded the modern resurgence of psychedelics. And it's interesting because there's kind of a couple pathways here. The traditional pathway for medicine to get into the hands of a patient is through FDA approvals. To get through FDA approvals, you have to take a drug through clinical trials, which are wildly costly to do. It might cost $100 million to get a drug through clinical trials. And what that means is you have to have an economic system set up such that they can recap that investment if it gets through. And this is what pharma companies do, is they take a bet on a drug and they bring it through a clinical trial where they test it for efficacy and safety and what types of patients it works best in and all of these things. And if the FDA says it met all the criteria, then they have an exclusive right to market and sell that drug for a number of years, and then they can pay back their investment and make profits on top of that. as we mentioned, psilocybin can be found everywhere. Like, there's no incentive to take psilocybin through the FDA process. There are a couple companies, Compass Pathways, a few other companies, who are taking a psilocybin analog drug through the clinical trials process.
A psilocybin analog means like a synthetic version?
Yeah.
So like a lab created.
Yeah, and what drug companies do is they try to figure out what is the active ingredient, what's the target that this drug is changing. And with classical psychedelics like psilocybin and LSD and DMT and these other ones, they call them a serotonin 2A agonist. So we have a serotonin system in our brain. It gets worked up about all sorts of things. SSRIs are a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, so they work on the serotonin system as well. These psychedelics, they agonize the 2A receptor. There's like a bunch of these receptors, but the 2A one is the one that they've identified as that's the one that causes you to trip. And so the classical psychedelics all point at that one. Other things that we might call psychedelic, like MDMA or ketamine, or even cannabis can be a psychedelic medicine. They're not 2A agonists. So from a pharmacology standpoint, we're like, the 2A is the target here. And so what a lot of drug companies are doing are making 2A agonists that some of them use the properties of psilocybin to do that. Some of them use properties of DMT or LSD, but these medicines do a lot more than just that. But that's what a lot of these drug companies are doing, is making a novel version of it that's inspired by these naturally occurring things. LSD is not a naturally occurring, but these other ones are, that they can patent, and then that patent gives them protection of bringing that drug through. The pharma company that brings a drug through clinical trials will have the ability for them to market it openly to the public, for it to be legal, for them to get providers to administer it, for them to get insurance companies to pay for it. So there's still a really good path there, and an important path, and a path that's trusted by a lot of people, where they're not going to touch something that's not FDA approved, right? So I still am in support of that, but it's going to be difficult for the incentives to make sense for a drug to get all the way through. A nonprofit, MAPS, tried to bring MDMA through clinical trials process by using philanthropy to do that, and they almost did it. It got denied maybe a year ago now, 8 months ago, something like that. And they're going to retry again, but it was a huge blow because they were at the finish line and got denied for reasons we don't have to go into. But
do you think it was any funny business though?
There was certainly potentially some political influence in the FDA decision process. There was also just, this is a nonprofit who is bringing something through an FDA process. They're not professional pharma people, and the way that they created their clinical trials was not usual. It didn't follow the very prescriptive way that people typically do clinical trials. And they actually worked with the FDA alongside, so it was kind of a surprise that came up as a problem. But I think at the core of it is that the FDA regulates a drug. They don't regulate therapy. So the FDA does not say, yep, CBT is approved for depression. Like they don't, that's not their jurisdiction. And what MAPS did, bringing MDMA through the clinical trials, was coupling MDMA with a very specific therapy protocol. And it wasn't clear if it was the drug or the therapy that had massive effects on, so they were doing it for PTSD. And it was massively effective. Their stage 3 trial, I think it was 60 or maybe even 80% of the people who had PTSD going into the trial didn't have it after their three dose regimen of MDMA.
Are veterans one of the groups that really bring the most support for psychedelics? In my mind, it's just like, yeah, we got to help these veterans.
Yeah.
This is like the only thing helping them. It's like, it seems like veterans, through my lens, are really helping shepherd psychedelics through.
Veterans are the reason why the legal pathways that have been carved exist right now. And this is why it's so different than cannabis or other kind of drug reform that we've seen, because largely psychedelics have been bipartisan. And I think that bipartisan nature, it comes from the veteran support. Veterans have found their own way to these medicines because it was needed. There's so much trauma so much substance abuse linked to that trauma, certainly, and other mental illness that comes from the sacrifices that they make, that I was talking to someone who was in special ops, and he said that when he was discharged, two of his friends who were discharged before him came to his house, picked him up, brought him over the border into Mexico to sit with Ibogaine. And it was all paid for. It was all taken care of. He said that he thinks that the SEAL Foundation actually pays for this. And he didn't, there was no like, do you want to do this? It was like, this is what you do when you get discharged. It's kind of like part of the process, is what he told me. I don't know what other lines what other service lines might do, but it's been embraced by the veterans. When MDMA was denied by the FDA, the VA was actually at the hearing speaking in support of approving it, and really saying that, there's problems with this trial. There are problems with how it was done. There was some ethical misconduct in some of the trials, but we don't have anything else to treat our veterans. This is the only thing we have, and we've shown it to be effective. Like the phase 3 trials were outstanding.
Because what's on the other side, they're just feeding them SSRIs.
Yeah, and that's not going well.
No,
and it's causing all sorts of other complications and increased costs for our U.S. government to pay for, because we're going to take care of the VA is going to take care of our veterans. So instead, the VA has actually seemingly turned to using research as the mechanism to actually take care of their soldiers. So you can serve these medicines in research. And so they've stood up a bunch of new research studies that have much wider aperture on inclusion criteria to actually treat people within, until we actually get these drugs approved.
So RFK is now the head of Health and Human Services. He has been in support of psychedelics. Do you see any change coming from that, or is that just more political kind of positioning speak?
Yeah. So RFK spoke in support of them. He talked about his son had really healing experiences with them.
With ayahuasca, I believe.
Yeah, and then also the new Surgeon General that was just appointed discussed openly on her blog the impact that psilocybin has had on her life. And so there seems to be support within the federal government under the Trump administration around it. That both excites me and scares me. I'm excited because maybe they can do something. Maybe they can get it rescheduled. Maybe they can help move along some of these clinical trials that are in the FDA process right now. But it might also polarize it. Everything is so polarized in our society right now. Psychedelics and drug reform has always been something that is a more progressive stance. And now that it's being taken up by our very right-wing federal government right now, I saw there was a clip shared on Colbert, who is a very left-leaning progressive comedian. He was making fun of the psychedelic healing that the Surgeon General had, and it hurt me a little, because I was like, this is why we can't have bipartisan issues. As soon as one picks it up, it gets trashed by the other, and
they poison it.
Yeah, and so I'm a bit afraid of that. And then the other aspect that is a total unknown is, who knows if this government is actually going to get anything done, because what we saw with DOGE and Health and Human Services was massive cuts across the board, really pulling the rug out of funding in science, and a lot of the actual human beings who work at the FDA who would work with these pharma companies to get things approved are no longer there anymore. And so how are we actually going to make any changes? I'm not sure. So it's basically with the pros and cons that I'm seeing, I'm like, I don't know, I'm not making any bets on it. What we haven't talked about, which I am making bets on, is the state models. So while there's the FDA and the federal approach to psychedelics, which, who knows if pharma companies are going to make it through, who knows if what's going to happen on the federal government. What we are seeing is state governments make some moves. 26 states have contemplated doing some policy around psychedelics. That currently in 2 states it is legal to use certain psychedelics. And the first one was Oregon in 2022. They launched a program to use psilocybin in a therapeutic setting, and they created rules around that program about how it's used and how it's tested and all of that. Colorado, right here in our home state, approved a similar law that expanded on that, and also adopted a personal use in that it's legal. It would be legal for me to give you mushrooms right now and gift them to you.
Up to a certain amount.
Yeah. I couldn't sell them to you, but it's okay to hold them and to use them and to gift them.
Is it legal, or is it just decriminalized?
It's decriminalized.
Meaning the police would not come after you.
Yeah.
No one would prosecute you.
Yeah, I think so. There's actually a stronger law within Denver County that put natural medicines at the same level as civil rights. But I think that just applies to Denver County was the first to pass something like that in the country. And then statewide, we have a decriminalization of natural medicines. And so,
what else might fall under those natural medicines?
It's actually everything on my shirt here.
Now we're talking.
Yeah. So it's everything except for peyote. So we have
except for peyote. How rude.
Yeah.
The only one that's grown here in the U.S.
Well, so the idea is because it's decriminalized, you certainly aren't allowed to bring these things across state lines, and so it's anything you can grow here. But the reason why peyote is not included in that is because the traditional areas where peyote is grown in nature, as peyote, the active psychedelic in it is mescaline. As that became popular, those areas were starting to be over harvested and losing the population of the natural growing peyote. And the Native American Church uses peyote as a sacrament, and so they were losing their supply of it, and they were also seeing the ways that the Westerners were using the medicines in ways that were they didn't see aligned with their practices, and so out of respect for their use and the lineage with it, peyote was excluded from the Natural Medicine Act in Colorado, which I think is a good thing. We can still use mescaline in a synthetic form, and we can still use mescaline derived from San Pedro cactus. But the peyote cactus takes years and years to grow, and it's a very fragile cactus. And the natural areas where it grows in Texas and Arizona, are sensitive desert areas.
But the San Pedro grows very fast.
Yeah.
You could buy it at the Boulder Farmers Market. I have several from the Boulder Farmers Market. Yeah. And you just need a lot more of it. It's not as concentrated.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually, I met a guy who grew his own peyote, and he grafted it on top of a San Pedro and got it to grow faster.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was like, wow, that's amazing. So it's like a long, San Pedro with a little peyote button on top. But yeah, these state models, it's kind of following in the footsteps of cannabis, in that cannabis is still federally illegal, but states have chosen to legalize it and create markets for it. And so far, the federal government has been hands off on it. And there's been some protections passed within the Department of Justice and federal government, or some guidance there saying hey, we're not going to touch it if you're abiding by state laws, which Trump actually repealed. But it seems like in practice they're not, like, the Department of Justice is not going after people who are abiding by state laws within the cannabis markets within the states.
And there's still challenging businesses to operate within, even within CBD. I was in CBD for a little bit, and it's like you can't get insurance, you can't get payment processing, you can't run ads anywhere. It's
banking, yeah, and so just like in cannabis, psychedelics is facing those same issues. We have 2 states. Oregon went live a couple years ago. Colorado is going live right now. Like in probably July, we'll see our first person dosed within the therapeutic model. So we have the personal use model, but how does someone actually use it and pay for it if you're not going to grow it yourself or find a friend to gift it to you? Colorado created a model where you can go to a healing center, you can sit with a licensed facilitator, you can use medicine that has been tested by state licensed labs, and that model is launching right now. And so this is where I saw the opportunity for our company, was to build a system that these licensees could use to stay in compliance. So the users of our system are facilitators, they're healing centers. They document what's necessary to make sure that they're protecting themselves and their clients and staying within compliance. And they're measuring outcomes. And so we're able to actually see the impact that these programs have had. And we've seen over 1,000 journeys in Oregon already in the system. We since rolling out a few months ago, we're about I think 40% of the market in Oregon, and we'll have bigger penetration in Colorado, I think, as this program rolls out here.
Because you are at the intersection of these facilitators and the patients, you are helping them connect?
Yeah, so that kind of came later. Essentially, our first path to market was give the practitioners the tools they need to operate in a compliant way. And that's kind of my background coming out of healthcare, is like they need a purpose-built electronic health record system. Although we are not an EHR, but it kind of works that way. You document what you need to. Reporting all works from it. But then what we realized in Oregon was that the market is quite fragmented, and these individual practitioners and clinics don't know necessarily how to attract customers well. And run their business in a number of different ways. The types of people who are sitting with these medicines are not business people necessarily. They're healers. They devote their life to that practice, and it starts with their own work and before they bring it to others. And so it is a noble practice that I don't want them to learn how to do email marketing. I want them to learn how to hold space really well. And so what we have started doing is finding customers for them. And so we have, this was just in March, kind of launched a consumer-facing website that focuses on helping people understand why they might use psychedelics, what the risks are, who it's for, who it's not for, how to actually make the decision if they're going to do it, and then how to find the right facilitator for them. So if you're a veteran dealing with PTSD, you might want to work with another veteran, or you might want to work with someone who focuses on PTSD, or you might want to work with someone who isn't going to re-traumatize you in whatever caused that. And so you might have a lot of preferences on who you might want to work with, and finding psychedelic facilitators is not an easy task. One of my insights in this was I was hearing these problems from our users in Oregon, and so I Googled psilocybin for depression. I'm like, that's the common use for psilocybin is for depression. And it took me 6 pages of Google search results before I found the first link to an actual provider, someone who was willing to give someone psilocybin for depression. The first 6 pages were wonderful. There were a lot of research papers. And so if you Google this, like you'll see a lot of the research that I've been talking about from, Hopkins and other great universities, and then articles from New York Times and all these other places about those research studies. But if you're actually trying to find the medicine, you got to really hunt. So it's a highly fragmented market that is not optimized to find customers. So we're trying to help find those customers for these practitioners. So that's what we've been doing in Oregon for the past few months is we think of it as concierge psychedelic care navigation. Someone comes into us and tells us what's going on. We have a care navigator on staff who will actually have a conversation with them and figure out who they are and if this is right and make sure they understand what they're getting into. And then we introduce them to a few facilitators based on those preferences. And then we support them in doing that because our software is helping the facilitators manage their system and payments and things like that.
What is the average cost for someone to sit with one of these facilitators?
It's expensive. It is the cheapest we found for a one-on-one facilitation in Oregon is $900. But it on average, I would say is more like $2,000. And it certainly goes up from there. There are some services that are really white glove where they'll pick you up from the airport and manage your entire experience. And those, are $3-4 grand. And there's some where you just need to show up yeah. So it ranges a bit. And of course, it's all out of pocket. No insurance is covering this. It's federally illegal. So there's a lot of stigma that comes with it too. And yeah, that's what we're trying to help overcome is help people understand why making an investment like that would make sense. And for a lot of the people who are skeptical of going this route, or who carry that stigma, having the guardrails of a regulated program around it really help them feel more at ease, knowing that this person is licensed by the state, they've gone through training, we're using medicine that's been tested, I can read the label, I know where it's from, and that if something happens, people can be held accountable because it's not, an underground retreat that, people are communicating on Signal where messages are disappearing and stuff. It's very above board. And while I believe in this regulated model, I am certainly not a proponent of this being the only way to experience psychedelics. I think that there's many valid ways to find psychedelic healing, whether it is underground or at these retreats or even using them in the woods with friends like I did to start. They can come in many forms, but I know that this more clinical and above board regulated space is going to be right for some people. And it's going to broaden the market and expand healing to more people when I think society really needs it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So today it's all underground. And with some of this underground, or some of the underground, there's a deep respect, prayer, connection to the traditional ways of sharing it, to the lineages that carried it for so long. How does that tradition, that kind of respect for the lineage holders carry into some of these? Can it blend in?
Yeah. So a lot of the facilitators we work with have been trained and have had apprenticeships with some of these lineage holders and carriers, and have worked in indigenous areas. And some of them, came from a more clinical background. It might be a psychiatrist who has a much more Western approach. And I think that the variability out there is good because it's going to allow people to find an environment that they feel comfortable in. There's actually a bit of debate in psychiatry around if it is the chemical interaction that's going on in the brain, the neurochemistry of the medicine that's causing the healing, or is it the phenomenology of it, the actual trip itself that causes the healing? And if it's the latter, then the ceremonial and ritualistic aspects of it, the spiritual aspects of it, are so important. And if it's the former, then like some pharma companies are trying to do, they're trying to create psychedelics without the trip, psychedelics that you can't detect that you're on, that you might be able to take like an antidepressant.
Like non-psychoactive. You don't even feel it.
Yeah. They're calling this class of psychedelics derived medicines neuroplastogens because they're focusing on that it creates more neuroplasticity in your brain, which is the fresh powder we were talking about, the ability to learn new ways.
Now with psilocybin, people will microdose, which is considered a dose so low that you're barely perceivable, and a lot of people will function in everyday life with that.
Yeah. Well, just to wrap up this point, it's like, it is likely that it's both the neurochemical aspects of what's going on in your brain and the phenomenological aspects of the drug that produce the healing benefits. The epiphanies that you can generate are because of the experience you're having, but your ability to integrate those back in is often tied to that neuroplasticity that's generated by psychedelics. And so these things I think are working in tandem. And so I think both of them are very important. The microdosing aspect I think is really fascinating because the theory around microdosing is, well, what if we take just such a little bit that it doesn't actually impact our way of being, such that I could be microdosing right now and neither of us would know that? And could that actually provide...
Are you microdosing right now, Niko?
I'm not.
Neither am I.
I don't...
but I would have if we had collaborated before this.
I tried microdosing a few times and I never... It actually made me... I don't know if I got my dosing wrong or what it was, but it actually made me kind of more on edge and a little anxious. And I've tried microdosing psilocybin.
Were you in a group setting?
No, just trying it on my own. And I feel like I worked out a dose that I couldn't feel, but I would often find at the end of the day, my wife reflected this back to me, that I'm just a bit more of an asshole when I microdose. Oh. And I'm like, wow, I probably shouldn't do that. But the idea with microdosing is you take a little bit, and from anecdotal evidence, what a lot of people have said is that it can really help with anxiety or depression, or even help people feel more productive or creative, help them change their perspective. There's this wonderful group called Moms on Mushrooms that's been getting a lot of press, which I love. And it started, I think, as a Facebook group of moms who just helped each other figure out how to microdose. And they talk about how it makes them better mother, more resilient, more fun, more present for their children. And I've heard a lot of those things, and that's why I wanted to have that for myself, but it wasn't working for me. One of the
don't give up on us, Niko.
No.
There's a stack. Paul Stamets has a stack.
Yeah.
Niacin, lion's mane, and the psilocybin, and again, like 1/10 of a gram. My concern, kind of going back to hey, we're making it stronger and stronger, is I'll go, when I'm in Chicago, that's where I'm from, I'll go into a dispensary there just to see what they have. Typically, I want CBD. I want CBD flower, CBD gummies, CBD chocolate, whatever, with a little THC. They don't have any of it. They're like, we've got the strongest THC you've ever seen. Wow. So my concern is people are blacking out on, this medicine. Yeah. They're having so much that they're just like trying to escape reality. It's too much. It's like a slippery slope that's coming up for me is, could it go that way with psilocybin? Why make it so strong? Sure, you have better yields and that's helpful, but you're already selling it for so much money. You're already to sit with somebody. It's like an incredible sum of money. I don't know. I just see that as a potentially slippery slope.
Yeah. Well, and the cost breakdown, of the $2,000 for sitting with the medicine, most of that goes to the facilitator.
Sure.
Some of it goes to the clinic, and only about $100 to $150 goes to the actual mushrooms. Mm-hmm. So the cultivators aren't, they're not making out great here, and the facilitators are spending 10 hours of time at the minimum. So
10 hours.
Well, with preparation and integration on the front and back end, and 4 to 6 hour journey, they're certainly spending probably 10 hours per client. So no one's really making a ton of money in psychedelics right now, except for training programs. There's a lot of people who are trying to become psychedelic facilitators. So
we've got one here in Boulder through Naropa.
Yeah, we've got a few actually. Naropa had to actually, because of the insurance problem that we talked about earlier, Naropa is a university. Their insurance found out that they were training psychedelic practitioners and they cut them off. And Naropa had to shut down their training program overnight, cancel classes and turn it off. Otherwise they would lose insurance and then lose their accreditation as a university. So they spun it out as Memoru, which is a new company associated with Naropa, which is their training program for psychedelics that has the same professors and stuff like that, but now they have to have a different company. And then we have IPI, which is another great training program, Integrative Psychiatry Institute up in Niwot, that is a great training program. There's a few others around too, but
are there any steps that you have to go through to become to be on your platform or to be connected? Because there's a lot of underground psychedelic therapists, and then maybe above ground, or I know above ground are just regular kind of therapists. Does someone have to get a certain accreditation or certification or something like that to be able to do this in this above ground way?
Yeah. Well, so our system is open. Anyone can use it. Like you could log on and use it and manage clients in it. And really what you would be using it for is documentation and measuring outcomes. In the regulated space, for those users, they need to be licensed by the state, and they have to go through a training program to get their license that has a bunch of requirements around it, what they're trained in, and they have to do a practicum where they actually sit with people and do some hands-on training. And once they get licensed, and they have to pay a license fee, then they can.
Any thoughts on that license fee? Any idea what that is?
I think it's a couple grand, like $2,000 or something like that.
Okay. I had spoken to a friend of mine that is a psychedelic therapist in preparation for this, and he thought it was maybe around 10.
I think in Oregon it was. Oregon's license fees were a lot more expensive. Colorado, in the rulemaking process, we did a lot of work giving feedback around what was challenging in Oregon about high licenses. And there, at least in the initial program, the license fees were a lot less. There's a whole schedule of fees for facilitators to healing centers and cultivators and the like. And so I don't remember the exact number, but I remember being like, oh, that's not as bad as Oregon. But yeah, it is expensive. You have to pay a lot, and you have to pay for a training program, which probably is more in the $10,000 range. And then you can get a license. And with a license, you can operate at a licensed healing center. You can use licensed medicine. You can advertise your services, so you can actually be above board, and you could buy a billboard on the freeway. You're not supposed to advertise to children, but I don't know how they do that. But you can like literally advertise. So that's great. That's what you get out of it. But you have a much more controlled environment that you have to operate within. You have to operate in these licensed healing centers, which may or may not be indoors or outdoors. Like they'll have an administration area you have to be within. And what our system does is really help them walk through all of the legal documents that are involved in it too, in the regulated space. In the underground space, the facilitator might have you sign a consent form so they can say knew what you were getting into. But in the regulated space, the state actually has documents that they want every participant to sign. So they have the right. They know what they're getting into, but they also have a safety plan. They have a support plan. They understand what the medicine is. They talk about dosing. And so it's something that facilitators have to walk through with their clients. In our system, that's really where people see the value in it. It is walking through the compliance steps. So that's all they need to use the system. If they actually want to get matches from us and get clients that we place with them, we have an application process for that. So we talk with them. We gather a bunch more information from them of who they are, who they like to work with, what their experience levels are. We actually look at their outcomes data that they're producing in the system to make sure that they're actually people we can trust that we would personally sit with. And then that kind of gets them into that next tier of now clients that we're bringing in. We can trust that the people we're placing them with are trustworthy.
You spoke to your systems now starting to gather some analytics, maybe over 1,000 different sittings.
Yeah.
Can you share any of that with us?
We haven't done a ton of analysis on it, but we've looked at some of the outcomes data, and we ask everybody the typical sort of net promoter score style question of like, how likely are you to recommend psychedelics to a friend? And on a 1 to 10 basis, it's like an 8.1. People would recommend it to a friend. And then we ask, how likely are you to recommend your facilitator that you worked with to a friend? Because we're trying to understand, the actual facilitator experience too. And that one was actually higher. It was like close to 9. 9 out of 10, they would recommend their facilitators. And so, and it's all skewed towards the high end of the scale. I was surprised to see there wasn't kind of a barbell where there was a few people who had kind of bad experiences. It was very much skewed towards the high end. And so that was really nice to see. We also have people document adverse events, which could be a medical or behavioral adverse event. So if someone had a bad reaction, or if someone, broke a window or something like that, that's like a behavioral adverse event. And we've seen very, very, very few of these documented in the system, which is really nice to see. And the ones that we did see are essentially people having a bad trip, but they're still rating their experience highly and highly therapeutic afterwards, because in that setting where you're working with a facilitator who's helping you out afterwards, a bad trip can still be really healing. And I've had my last 2 years of working with psychedelics have all been really challenging. Like they're not fun and euphoric anymore. Like they're, the depths of humanity feel like they're on me. And I come out of them with a lot of healing and more empathy and understanding. And they were very challenging, but I got something out of them. And I think that's also what we see in the data, is that something that could be challenging can also be beneficial growth.
So as people are coming to the platform and they're looking at different therapist options, do they get to then speak with the therapist and kind of do like a little interview or connection over the phone or anything like that?
Yeah. So what we essentially provide our Care Navigator services to basically answer any questions someone might have, to have a lay of the land from someone who's really not like trying to, like we're not going to sit with them and all of that. So it's a very neutral kind of conversation in answering questions. And then if they want to talk to a facilitator, we connect them with facilitators. So we'll give them a couple profiles of facilitators who we think would meet their needs, and we tell them why. We're like, hey, this person has the background you're looking for and is in a location that you were looking for. So do you want to talk with them? And if they do, then we make a warm introduction, and they kind of go from there. And so what often happens is they'll schedule a call, they'll meet that facilitator. We recommend people talk to at least 2, but probably 3 different facilitators, because you want to get a sense for different styles, different approaches. And I think it's so important to be able to feel really comfortable with your facilitator, because you're often in a really vulnerable position, and you need to feel comfortable enough to be held in that vulnerability by your facilitator. And that's going to mean something different for everybody. And so I encourage people to talk to a few and really find someone that they would feel really comfortable with.
So that's your number one thing to look for, is just comfort.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, there's a whole foundation of things before that of like, is
Sure, but now you've gotten to, here's the 2 to 3 that we're recommending. It's just, who do you feel safe, comfortable, at ease with?
Yeah. And we actually recommend, we give people questions to ask these facilitators. Like, here's a list of questions that you might want to ask the same questions to them to see how you like their answers. And some of those are, what is your philosophy around this? Why are you doing this work? It's nice to get kind of a, like, understanding why they're there. Yeah. So these questions help people try to understand their facilitator in a way where they can determine if they feel comfortable with them. It gets back to, do they like the vibe?
Any other data points that have shown up that have surprised you, or you think people would find interesting? Like, how many people come back for maybe a second time?
That's what I was going to mention, is that we actually haven't seen a lot of that. So I mentioned earlier, we've seen a lot of people having really positive experiences that they would recommend to others that were highly therapeutically beneficial according to, their own perception of it. But it's not something that they're coming back to like every month. We have certainly seen some repeats. I should actually run that like, how many repeats do we have in a cohort of 1,000? I'm not sure, but what I hope, the story I tell myself about that fact, is that they got what they needed. And that's kind of the sentiment around these medicines, is that they are not addictive. After I do a psychedelic journey, I am good for a while. Like, I do not want to touch these medicines frequently. Yeah, and that's my experience, but I think the data also shows that. But also, what we saw in a lot of clinical trials is that one dose of these medicines, like that, they look for the therapeutic benefit after one dose, not after using it for a year or something like that, but after one dose of psilocybin, one afternoon. Do you still have depression? Do you still have anxiety? Do you still have OCD or PTSD or anorexia, or so many trials looking at different mental illness around this? It's really on a one dose model, because it is that change, that one snow globe shake, that can actually cause these dramatic changes. So I'm hoping that's what people are discovering, is that, it's expensive. But if you think about therapy and antidepressants over a year, like, it's got to cost more than $2,000.
That's a good point.
The quote that people say is like, it's 10 years of therapy in one session. And I've certainly felt that.
I think I've done then a couple hundred years worth of therapy. It feels good.
That's why you're so wise.
That's why we're on the same page right now. I wonder, what are your as as pharmaceuticals start to enter into the space? Help me understand the difference between like a pharmaceutical offering, a synthetic, and something that's completely natural.
I don't. So we don't really have any pharmaceuticals that have gotten to market yet, but we do have synthetic psychedelics like LSD. We do have MDMA, which is a synthetic, and these drugs, these molecules can occasion amazing experiences that are wildly healing. The texture of them, I've certainly experienced this, but it's talked about that, LSD and psilocybin are both serotonin 2A agonists. So they have the same kind of target from a pharmaceutical perspective, but they feel so different. And they, LSD is a much longer experience. And I have felt that psilocybin is a much more grounding in nature kind of experience where I need to be outside. I need to be with nature. I feel one with nature with psilocybin. With LSD, I don't feel as much of that, but I certainly still can experience a lot of healing and feelings of interconnectedness and love and those sorts of things. But it's like the texture is a little different. So I don't really know how to answer that question at large, but I think that there is validity in pharmaceutical companies continuing to try to bring these medicines through the traditional pathways, because our society is set up around these traditional pathways, and that, if we're going to get insurance to pay for these medicines, it has to start with an FDA approval. And once that happens, then insurance companies might be open to saying, well, that's actually the same as mushrooms that are grown and tested in these state labs and these state programs. And so maybe we'll cover that too. Because of what I believe is that when people are using psychedelics in intentional ways for healing, they're going to be healthier. They're certainly going to be, like from a behavioral health standpoint, healthier, but I think they'll also be healthier in their bodies and more aligned with their bodies. And that's going to drive healthcare costs down, with all the comorbidities that are associated with substance use or depression or anxiety. Those mental illnesses cause physical illnesses in our bodies, which cause increasing healthcare costs. And so for someone who pays for healthcare, like Medicare, Medicaid, or insurance companies, if they actually want to reduce the amount that they have to pay aligned with their profit motive in the private insurance case, they could cover psychedelics and actually spend $2,000 on a psychedelic therapy and probably reduce the overall cost of care for that person over their lifetime. So I think it economically makes sense from a profit motivating standpoint for insurance to cover psychedelics, but there's a lot of stigma. It's high risk. It's federally illegal. It's not FDA approved. These are all things that stand in the way of insurance companies making that move right now.
I used to be of the camp that if it's not natural, I'm not interested in it. So if it's not grown in nature, grown in the ground, if it's a synthetic. Yeah. So now, after experiencing some of these analogs, it doesn't want to be said. I'm going to say it though, that there is a lot of power in those synthetics, in those. So anything from ketamine, MDMA, LSD, mescaline, all of those have tremendous healing abilities. I think the risk, in my eyes, around it is overdosing on it. If you have something that's natural, like you can't smoke enough weed to kill you. You can't consume. I guess you could consume like 10 grams of mushrooms. Would that kill you? I don't know, but
I've seen people do it.
Yeah. But you can have way too much of these. I don't know what taking a triple dose of MDMA would do to somebody. And it's so small, and they're just into the tiniest amounts that synthetics are just, you can make it so concentrated. That's where my, I suppose, worry, concern is about it. And then certainly with people sneaking things, this is below ground, but sneaking, like putting fentanyl into these different things as well. Just last month, 4 people in Boulder died from fentanyl.
Wow.
Yeah, I wonder what your thoughts are around maybe abusing drugs or the number one issue in Boulder today, I had Aaron Brockett, who's the mayor of Boulder, on here last week, and he said the number one issue he faces is homelessness, and it's a mental illness and substance abuse. And the substance is, alcohol is number one, and then it's opioids, and then fentanyl-laced opioids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I struggle with this because I see those drugs as so different than psychedelics in that.
And there's this blanket statement of drugs.
Yeah.
That ayahuasca is a drug and Oxycontin is a drug.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of those drugs you mentioned, opioids and alcohol, they dump dopamine on our system, and dopamine is the pleasure chemical that makes us want more of whatever helped us get it. And while some of these psychedelics do that as well, they also create, they dump serotonin and oxytocin, all these other things that can actually really help us from a healing perspective. And the traditional psychedelics, at least the 2A agonists, have really shown to be non-toxic in that you can't really take enough to overdose on. There are some, ibogaine and ayahuasca combine a psychedelic compound with another drug that you can overdose on. And so they certainly have to be taken with more care. But those experiences are so powerful that people don't want to go back to them. Oftentimes with ayahuasca, you end up purging from both ends for hours all through the night. And it's not something that's used recreationally, like down by the creek.
Yeah, no one's microdosing ayahuasca.
Yeah. And so, and there's certainly accounts of people taking 100x doses of LSD, and it's a wild trip, but they come back. They're cross-eyed for a day, and then they come back. There's not with opioids and especially fentanyl with its potency, it's very easy to overdose. And because of the highly addictive properties of it and the euphoria that it brings, there's a high incentive to go back for more and go bigger, which doesn't seem to arise as much with psychedelics. I think with MDMA, there's certainly a euphoria that, and MDMA is probably the biggest culprit of abuse amongst these groups, which is certainly part of the FDA ruling on it. Yeah, and ketamine, there's been a lot of abuse as well. Ketamine it is approved by the FDA for anesthesia. That's actually where it has been used for decades. And then it was found that at a very low dose, it can produce psychedelic-like experiences and healing experiences. And so it's often like any anesthesiologist will tell you, like, I use ketamine every day, like with patients. I inject it, and it puts people out and helps them float. And so when you overdose on a recreational or a psychedelic dose of ketamine, you black out. And that's what happened to Matthew Perry, and he blacked out in a hot tub and died.
On ketamine?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is that what they call a K-hole?
I'm not sure.
I've just people talking in the streets.
I've heard that term. I think that the K-hole might come before the full
blackout.
Okay. Yeah. But the blackout is it's what anesthesiologists use when you get put under to have surgery. Like, it's a real blackout.
Oh, okay.
You're gone. It's not like an alcohol one where you can kind of wake someone up and, or you don't remember. It's like, no, you're unconscious and, can't move. Mm-hmm. So it's a serious medicine in that regard. And then ketamine has actually also been FDA approved for treatment-resistant depression and major depressive disorder. And the drug company Janssen brought a specific form of ketamine, which is administered in a nasal. It's called S-ketamine. So you squirt it up your nose and it mists, and you take it that way. And that is being used in ketamine clinics covered by insurance. The med school here at Anschutz has a ketamine clinic where they do it that way. So that FDA-approved pathway opened up the ability for insurance to cover ketamine for depression, and it's been a breakthrough therapy in that regard. $5 billion business for Janssen in its second year on the market. So a really big market there.
Just on the ketamine nasal spray,
Yeah.
$5 billion in their second year.
Yeah, which sounds like a big number for us, but for pharma, they're like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. But it is the fastest growing drug in their portfolio. This is what I heard at that ACNP conference that I was at. But ketamine requires more frequent use. So you have I think it's an eight dose once a week protocol is what's typical under using it for depression. And then you might go off that for a while, but then come back on. Whereas what we've been seeing with psilocybin is it's like one dose and you might be cured.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You had a stint at MIT where you were studying AI strategy. How does AI play a role in any of this today?
Yeah, that was a virtual program, so I didn't actually walk the halls of MIT. But
Still, MIT is super legit. I know people at MIT, and nice job.
It was awesome. I think AI. Well, and that was before we saw the proliferation of these large language models that everyone's using these days. So I don't think that program prepared me one bit for what we're seeing right now. I think we're absolutely going through a revolution. Much like we saw initially with the Industrial Revolution, and then certainly with computers, and then with the internet, and now with AI, it's a step change in society. It is a productivity revolution, and I think it's going to change a lot of things. I think the proliferation of AI will coincide with the increased use of psychedelics. I think that they're going to travel together because as we are outsourcing more of our cognitive intelligence to AI, helping it, using it to help us think through problems, using it to help us write, to answer any question you could imagine at the tip of your fingers immediately, we're going to actually value human intelligence and the art of being human more. And I think psychedelics will help us realize those things. Psychedelics bring us such immense feelings of love and interconnectedness and ability to have the courage to be who you really are and relate to each other. And when AI changes the job landscape and the way that we work and produce, I imagine that we will value people who can really live in their own skin more. And psychedelics will help us do that. And so when I think about this craze that the world seems to be in around AI, first off, I am so thankful to not be working in tech right now. Even though, my company is software, but it's not a tech company. It's a psychedelics company that creates healing. I am thankful to not be in it, but I am also thankful to be working in psychedelics because I think that it's what the world will need as we grapple with how to become a new version of humanity as we have these tools at our fingertips that are amazingly powerful.
Do you have a boundary for yourself personally or professionally around AI or for your family?
That is a great question.
Because it's just like, hey, there's boundaries around iPhones and iPads for kids.
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, what's the boundary with AI? I'm finding boundaries that I need to set within myself because I'm like, whoa, I am outsourcing way too much of my brain. It was fun to try, but I first outsourced my GPS on my phone, and then I'm like, oh, I can't get anywhere. And now I'm like learning that back, and I'm like, I can't give it my whole brain. I'm not even going to be able to know how to talk soon.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that was really scary, speaking of screens and stuff, I have a 8-year-old, and his school put on they hired a researcher to come talk about screen time. And one of the things they said was frequently now freshmen going into college are actually illiterate, in that they, and the definition of literacy is being able to use reading and writing and speaking to accomplish a goal. And what they said is that because of people's attention spans being so short, they can't read more than a paragraph before needing to do something else, needing to move on. And
this whole podcast will get clipped into 15-second segments.
Yeah, right along those lines. That's terrifying to me. And I was, with my 8-year-old, I was seeing that in him. Like, I'll tell him to brush his teeth, and he's like, okay, and he starts walking to the bathroom. He'll get a little distracted, and then suddenly he's doing something else. And he's like, why am I over here? And I'm like, you were going to go brush your teeth, remember? Or I'll have to keep nudging him along, right? And we've been really strict with screen time. Yeah. So, but seeing how he reacts to high-paced, clip style, YouTube shorts, or gaming, where the product of the game is his attention, that they're trying to get him to buy things within the game. I think it creates that. So it sort of changed the way I've thought about screen time with him. And I haven't really thought about how that might apply to AI. We have a Google Assistant in one part of the house that he loves going and just talking to, and he'll talk to it for a long time, and he'll go down some cool rabbit holes where he'll be like, tell me about an animal, and and he's learning about it and stuff. But I do worry about, what if we lean on that too much? And with ChatGPT, I have 5 different LLMs on my phone right now that I could pull up and ask whatever I want and compare answers.
What's your number one? Who's your go-to?
ChatGPT is my personal assistant.
Same.
Yeah. And I have all sorts of projects and have trained it in all different ways and stuff, and use it frequently. Do
you share anything around that? I would love to read about how you do that, learn how you do that.
Yeah, I haven't really shared it publicly, but I have a little WhatsApp group called AI Magicians, because in my mind, the people who aren't using AI look at what we're doing with AI, and it's indistinguishable from magic, because it's so powerful. So I'm happy to add you to that group.
Oh, please. I'm going to follow up with you on that one.
And so we talk about how we prompt it, which is most of the conversation, because it's that is the new art we're learning, is how to ask the right questions in the right way to get the result you want. But actually, within our company, we use NotebookLM a lot, which is a Google product. And what I like about it is super simple to use, and it is in a confined box that doesn't search the internet. And so what we'll do is actually load in information, and we have the paid version of it that's secure and protected, and it's not shared with the wider LLM. And for instance, we will record all of our meetings using a different AI tool, Fathom, and we take the transcripts and load them all into NotebookLM. And we'll say, what's the agenda for the team meeting? And it'll be you should talk about all these things because this is stuff that you still need to work on. And then we'll talk about them, and then we'll load those notes in. It'll know we resolved certain things or we created new follow-ups. And so we basically load all of our transcripts into this thing. And I have different notebooks. We have one for the team. I have notebooks for each person on the team with whatever I'm working on with them. I'll load everything in there, and just use it as an ever-present sort of assistant that doesn't forget anything.
That's where AI is really strong, or at least right now. It's just dumping a ton of data into it and making sense of it, finding patterns, just understanding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and even in the startup world, one of the art of being a founder is understanding who you're serving, who your clients are, what is the persona of these people, how do you figure out what they care about, what language do they use, what are their challenges and their hopes and fears. And so the way that I've always done that as a founder is talking to people, and I'll have conversations with people and really try to understand those things. Now I record those conversations, and sure, I'm learning, but what I'm also doing is putting them into one of these notebooks and asking, what's the most important issue for this type of persona, or how would they describe this problem that I'm trying to solve? And it'll use their language that they came up with on these calls that I've had with them, to really do more of a qualitative analysis of customer discovery that would typically happen in my brain without much process, but is now happening with the help of these tools that are ever present. They'll remind me of things and conversations that I had a year ago that I, aren't present in my brain anymore, but it still remembers.
This podcast is brought to you by B Micro, organic freeze-dried microgreens for easy, natural nutrition. Sprinkle them on any meal and enjoy the benefits. Shop now at bmicro.farm and use code STEVE15 to save. Well, Niko, I could talk to you for a long time. I'm really glad that we sat back down again, and I would love to do this again. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you got a family, and we're about time. I want to offer you and your family a gift. One of the products that I make. That booster blend right there, that is a blend of different types of microgreens. 1 teaspoon is equal to 1 cup of leafy greens. And the main benefit is it's very detoxifying. Are you familiar with microgreens at all?
Yeah, I've used I've used like greens that you mix into drinks before. And I've certainly bought like fresh microgreens at the store and used them, and they go bad really quickly and stuff. So I'm always like, can I use them quick enough? So there's
no beating fresh, and get them at the farmer's market where they cut them living for you right there, and then move them to a glass container as soon as you can.
I'm familiar in that regard, but I love this product. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm excited to try it because I love the idea of microgreens, but I struggle with the inconvenience of them. And I think this is a convenient way of delivering them.
This is our new smokable blend. It's
amazing.
barely psychedelic. I'm trying to make a more addictive product.
Just add some nicotine to it.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Well, I've got a lightning round that we'll wrap this up on, and it is sponsored by B Micro, the easiest way to sneak more vegetables into anyone's diet. How are your kids with eating vegetables?
Not very good.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a good...
Report back.
Yeah.
Just don't cook it.
Okay.
So once you plate whatever it is that you're making, it seems like breakfast is the most popular time. And our post-purchase survey, it's like pretty much everyone's just putting it on their eggs. So
nice.
Start there.
Yeah, I will try that. Yeah, and we like making smoothies too, and I always like sneak a handful of spinach in or something, but this will be a great additive to that, yeah.
All right. First psychedelic experience in one word.
Awe.
Most underrated plant or fungi. Maybe look to your shirt.
These are all highly rated.
Yeah, within the people that know, but there's so many people that have never even heard of any of these.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would say psilocybin mushrooms then. Yeah. They have the power to change the world.
Mm-hmm. Most overhyped trend in psychedelics right now.
Microdosing.
Best part about living in Boulder.
Mountains. And the creek.
Who should I have on the podcast next?
Kyle Lefkoff. He's a pharmaceutical investor, but he also helped to found and bring Horizons Dairy, which was one of the first organic dairy companies public in the 80s, which is a huge company now, Horizons.
One hidden talent.
Rubik's Cube.
Share a little more.
I do them on the phone call. It's like my fidget toy. Yeah.
Someone doing amazing work in psychedelics right now.
Oh, I gotta say, my good friend Henry from Tricycle Day, who actually produces these shirts, but he has this beautiful newsletter that really brings psychedelics to a level that's humorous and light and approachable. Henry Winslow over there, great guy.
A policy change you'd implement tomorrow?
I would have the Medicare cover psychedelic therapy.
One thing you wish more entrepreneurs understood?
The paradox of knowing you're right and knowing you're wrong, holding those two things strongly and at the same time. You've
ran, been a leadership team of maybe 7 different organizations from my count. How do you know when to let go of one?
For me, it's about, am I still having fun? Is it bringing joy?
And what's bringing you joy today?
The conversations I got to have every day with people about psychedelic healing.
Niko, thank you very much. Anything else you want to share with us? Where can people learn more about what you're working on? Check out your work. I know you're a writer, great blogs.
Yeah, our website is withalthea.com, and that's probably the best place to find me and read what, at least on the psychedelic world, what I'm writing about. On LinkedIn, I read a lot about on the entrepreneurial side. And if folks will be at Psychedelic Science coming up in a month, we're going to have a booth. It's going to be amazing. I'm giving a talk there on ethics in business, which will be really nice. which will be really intimidating but fun. So yeah, I'll be around.
Great. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thank you.
See you, everybody.